No one survives the world unscarred, not the lord with his castle, not the beggar with his bowl, not the poet who dreams of spring, not the butcher who wields the blade. The world does not bow to your name, your blood, or your prayers. It grinds all beneath its weight. Kings and bastards, queens and pawns, all equal in the end, their bones mingling in the dust. In Westeros, where the snow falls red with betrayal and the sun sets on shattered oaths, survival is not a birthright. It is a theft, a prize you seize from the jaws of fate with bared teeth and bloodied hands. And no one understood this better than Sandor Clegane the Hound, a man carved from pain, tempered by fire, and bound by nothing but his own brutal truth. When the Red Wedding drowned the Starks in blood, when the Freys and Lannisters feasted on the corpse of hope, Arya Stark was left with nothing but a list of names and a heart forged in vengeance. It was the Hound, the man she swore to kill, who taught her how to steal life from a world that takes everything. The truth is a blade. It cuts deep and it does not care if you bleed. Arya Stark learned this not from her father's honor, her mother's love, or her brother's crown, but from a scarred dog who dragged her through the ashes of ruin. The Red Wedding was no mere slaughter. It was a lesson etched in gore, a truth carved into the bones of House Stark. Trust is a luxury no one can afford. Loyalty is a lie that binds the foolish. Ned Stark died for his honor. His head struck from his shoulders on the steps of Baelor's Sept. His principles, a noose around his neck. Robb Stark died for his love. His body pierced his direwolf's head, sewn to his corpse in a mockery of kingship. Catelyn Stark died for her hope, her throat slit as she begged for her son's life, her screams drowned in the laughter of traitors. But Arya, she lived, not because the gods spared her, not because fate was kind, but because she learned to sharpen her hate into a weapon, and the Hound, that snarling, broken beast, was her unwilling teacher. He was no knight, though he wore the white cloak of the Kingsguard for a time. He spat on chivalry, mocked the songs Sansa Stark once sang in the halls of Winterfell, her voice soft with dreams of true knights and golden princes. Knights, he said, were frauds, golden armor hiding black hearts, false vows masking cruelty. His own brother, Gregor Clegane the Mountain, was proof enough, a knight in name, a monster in truth, a giant of cruelty, who burned his own kin for the crime of touching a toy. When Sandor was a boy, barely old enough to dream, Gregor held his face to the flames, scarring him for life physically. Yes, but deeper still in his soul. The Hound carried that fire in his flesh and his fury, a reminder that the world is cruel and men are crueler. He killed without pretense, fought without glory, and lived without illusions. In a land where Tywin Lannister wove schemes from the shadows, where Joffrey Baratheon played at king with a butcher's glee, Sandor Clegane was the only man who spoke plain. "The world is built by killers," he told Arya once, his voice rough as gravel, his eyes hard as flint. "You'd better get used to looking at them." And look. She did, into his scars, into her own heart, into the truth of what it takes to survive. Arya was a wolf, but a cub still when the Hound found her. The Red Wedding had torn her family to pieces. Robb's head, grey wind's pelt, Catelyn's scream echoing in the halls of the twins. She was no longer the girl who dreamed of swordplay with Jon Snow, who ran through Winterfell's courtyards with a stick for a blade, laughing as Bran chased her. She was a name on a list, a prayer whispered in the dark. Cersei, Joffrey, ill in pain, Meryn Trant the Hound. She hated him for Micah the Butcher's boy, cut down like a dog for Joffrey's whim on the road to King's Landing. She saw him as a monster, a Lannister blade, a name to be crossed off with blood. When he took her from the twins, claiming ransom as his prize, she swore she'd kill him. She dreamed of plunging needle, her thin little sword, into his heart, watching the life fade from his eyes. But dreams are for fools, and Arya was no fool for long. The Hound did not chain her like a prisoner. He did not beat her like a slave. He did not treat her like a prize to be bartered for gold. He fed her, though the bread was stale and the meat tough. He sheltered her, though the nights were cold and the stars indifferent. He fought for her, though he claimed it was for coin. Through the riverlands, through mud and blood and the stench of death, he dragged her not as a captor, but as something else. A teacher, a mirror, a man who saw in her the fire he'd carried since childhood. She hated him. Yes, but hate is a poor teacher. Survival demands more. It demands cunning resilience, the will to wake each morning and spit in the face of despair, and the hound in his rough, unyielding way gave her that. Consider the road they walked. The riverlands were a wasteland, the small folks starving, their homes burned by war. Lords schemed in their castles, but out here there were only bandits, broken men, and the ghosts of the fallen. Death waited in every shadow, and trust was a noose. At an inn, when men came for them, sellswords or outlaws, it mattered not. The hound fought, not with the grace of a tourney knight, but with the savagery of a cornered beast. He cut through. Flesh broke bones, spilled blood, until the floor was slick and the air thick with the coppery stench of death. Arya watched her small hands clutching needle, her heart pounding. He did not fight for honor or glory, he fought to live, and in that moment she saw it to survive. You must be the blade, not the sheath. You must be the one who strikes first, who kills before you are killed. He taught her to move, to strike, to kill, if she must, not with words but with action. When she stabbed a man to save him. Her first kill, plunging needle into a boy's belly as he lunged for the hound. Sandor did not flinch. He nodded as if to say, "This is the way." The hound was no stranger to vengeance. His own list had one name, Gregor, the brother who burned him, who towered over Westeros like a plague, a giant of cruelty clad in steel. Sandor's hate was a furnace, but it was not blind. He knew vengeance alone consumes. He saw it in Arya's eyes, that same fire, and he did not douse it. Instead, he tempered it. Kill clean, he might have said, though his lessons were never so neat. He showed her the difference between rage and purpose. Rage makes you sloppy, reckless, a fool who dies with a blade in her gut. Purpose makes you deadly, a shadow who strikes and vanishes. When she recited her list, her prayer of names, he did not mock her. He understood, but he also showed her that a list is not enough. You must be strong enough to wield it. You must be cunning enough to live long enough to see it through. In Sansa Stark, the hound saw innocence. A fragile thing, he could never have a thing he could never be. He saved her from the King's Landing mob, cutting down men who would have torn her apart in the streets, their hands clawing at her dress, their eyes wild with hunger and hate. He carried her to safety, not for thanks, not for reward, but because something in him could not let her break. He offered to take her from the city during the Blackwater, when fire, his greatest fear, consumed the night, when Stannis's fleet burned and the world seemed to end in green flame. He stood in her chambers, drunk and broken, and offered her truth. "I'll keep you safe." But Sansa was a dreamer clinging to songs, even as Joffrey's cruelty stripped them away. She refused him, and he left a deserter in a city of liars. Arya was different. She was no dreamer. She was a fighter, a wolf with teeth. Where Sansa needed protection, Arya needed forging, and the hound, in his rough way, gave her the tools. He taught her to see the world as it is, a place where trust is a noose, where mercy is a risk, where only the sharp survive. Their journey was no ballad. It was a march through hell. The hound dragged Arya through villages gutted by war, past fields where crops rotted and bodies swung from trees. He taught her to steal, to take what you need because no one will give it. He taught her to lie, to hide her name, her face, her truth. Because a Stark in the open is a Stark dead. He taught her to watch, to listen, to know when to run and when to fight. At every step she resisted him, her hate a shield. But she learned. She learned because she had to. When they faced danger, a pack of wolves, a band of outlaws, a storm that turned the world to mud, he stood between her and death. Not because he cared, he'd say, but because she was his ticket to gold. But lies are for knights, and the hound was no knight. He fought for her because something in him, buried deep beneath the scars and the snarls, saw her as more than a prize. She was a spark, a flame, a thing worth keeping alive. The Vale was their end, or so it seemed. Brienne of Tarth, another would-be knight, found them on a rocky slope, her oath to Catelyn Stark driving her to save Arya. She saw the hound as a threat, a villain, a dog to be put down. He saw her as another liar, another knight with a sword too clean for the world's filth. They fought, and it was no dance. It was brutal, raw, a clash of steel and bone. Brienne was strong, honourable, but the hound was relentless. He fought for life, for Arya, for himself. But even dogs tire, and he fell. His body broke and his blood, soaking the earth, bleeding out on a mountainside. He begged Arya to kill him. "Do it," he rasped, his voice thick with pain. "Cross it off your list." He taunted her, spoke of Micah, of her pain, trying to goad her into ending him, but she didn't. She stood over him, her face unreadable, her eyes older than her years. And then she walked away, not out of hate, but something deeper. Respect, understanding. She had learned from him not just how to kill, but how to live, how to steal breath from a world that chokes you, how to be a wolf in a den of lions. Why did Sandor Clegane teach Arya Stark to survive? Because he saw himself in her, not the girl, not the Stark, but the fire, the child burned by betrayal just as he was burned by fire. In Sansa he saw what he could never save, innocence, a thing too delicate for a world of blades. In Arya he saw what he could shape strength, a thing that could endure. He was no knight, no hero. He was a killer, a dog, a man who lived because he refused to die. But in Arya he saw more than a ransom or a captive. He saw a spark that could outlast the flames, and so he fed it not with kindness, not with warmth, but with truth. The truth that the world is a graveyard, and only those who fight can walk its paths. The world does not reward the honourable Ned Stark's head rolled for it, his principles a noose around his neck. It does not spare the hopeful Catelyn. Stark's throat was slit for it, her pleas drowned in laughter. It does not bow to the vengeful unless they are cunning. Arya Stark survived because she learned this, and the hound was her guide. He gave her no songs, no promises, no lies. He gave her the only thing that matters, the will to keep going, to wake each morning and spit in the face of death, to carve your name not on a list but in the bones of those who wronged you. He taught her to be a blade, to be a shadow, to be a wolf, and in doing so he gave her something no one else could, the strength to endure a world that breaks all it touches. But survival is not triumph. It is not justice. It is not peace. Survival is a theft, and it comes at a cost. Arya learned to kill, to lie, to disappear. She became no one in the house of black and white, a faceless servant of death, but she remained a Stark, her list a tether to her past. The hound's lessons carried her through Braavos, through the dark halls of the faceless men, through the long night when the dead walked. But they also marked her. Every kill took something from her, every lie buried the girl she was. Every step toward vengeance carried her further from Winterfell's warmth. The girl who left her home was not the woman who returned, and the hound, if he lived, would not be surprised. He knew the price. He paid it every day, his scars a map of the cost of living. Look at Westeros now, or what remains of it. The Iron Throne is slag-melted by dragonfire. The dragons are gone. Their roars silenced. The great houses, Stark, Lannister, Targaryen, are scattered, their banners torn. Power shifts like sand, and loyalty shifts faster. Cersei, Lannister loved her children, and it blinded her to the world's knives. Daenerys Targaryen burned for justice, and it consumed her, her ideals turning to ash as King's Landing burned. Jon Snow carried his duty, and it exiled him, a bastard king sent to wander the snows. Tyrion Lannister spoke of cunning, but even he could not outrun fate, his words no match for the weight of history. The Game of Thrones is no game at all. It is a pyre, and all who play it burn. The Hound knew this. He lived it, and in Arya he passed it on. The road from the twins to the Vale was long, and it was cruel. The Hound and Arya walked it together, not as friends, not as allies, but as two souls bound by the same hard truth. The world does not forgive. It does not forget. It only tests, and those who pass its tests do so not with honor, but with will. The hound's lessons were not gentle, they were not kind, they were not meant to soothe, they were meant to sharpen. Every step they took, every fight they survived, every night they endured, he showed her what it means to live when all else is lost. He showed her that vengeance is a fire that warms but also burns. He showed her that survival is a choice, and it is never free. Consider the moment at the inn when death came for them in the form of men with swords and greed. The hound fought as he always did, with no thought for glory. He was a storm of steel, a force of raw, unrelenting will. Arya, small and fierce, fought too, not because she wanted to, but because she had to. Her first kill was no triumph. It was a necessity, a boy's life ended by her blade to save her own. The hound saw it, and he did not praise her. He did not comfort her. He gave her what? An acknowledgement. A nod that said she had crossed a line and there was no going back. That was his way. No lies, no softness, only the truth, that to live is to kill, to fight, to endure. Their nights were no kinder, under stars that offered no warmth. They camped in the wild, the hound's growls and Arya's silence their only companions. He taught her to read the land, to know when danger was near. He taught her to hide her fear, because fear is a scent that draws predators. He taught her to sharpen, needle to keep it close, to make it part of her. Not a toy, not a dream, but a tool for survival. And in those quiet moments when the fire burned low and the world was still, she saw him not as a monster, but as a man who carried his pain like a cloak, who lived despite it, who fought because it was all he knew. She hated him still, but hate is a thin shield. Understanding is stronger. The hound's past was a shadow that followed him. Gregor's fire was not just a scar on his face, it was a wound in his soul. He told Arya of it once in a moment of rare openness, his voice thick with drink and pain. He spoke of a boy who loved a toy, Knight who dreamed of something better, only to have it burned away. That boy was gone, he said, replaced by the hound. A dog who served but never trusted Arya listened, and though she did not pity him, she understood. Her own dreams had burned Winterfell, her family, her hope. They were alike in their way, two souls marked by loss, driven by fire. And in that understanding she began to learn not just from his actions, but from his existence. To survive is to carry your scars, to wear them, to make them part of your strength. The Red Wedding was a wound that never closed. For Arya it was the end of everything she knew. Her mother's scream, her brother's body, the betrayal of those they trusted. It was a lesson in the cost of faith. The hound did not let her dwell on it. He did not let her grieve. Grief, he knew, is a luxury for the safe. Instead, he pushed her forward through the mud, through the blood, through the pain. He showed her that the only way to honor the dead is to live, to fight, to refuse to break. His lessons were harsh, but they were true. And in that truth, Arya found the strength to keep going, to keep her list, to keep her fire. The Vale was not the end of Arya's story, but it was the end of her time with the hound. When Brienne struck him down, when his blood painted the rocks, he faced death as he had faced life, unflinching, unyielding, honest. His plea to Arya was not for mercy, but for release. He wanted her to end him, to take her vengeance, to close the circle. But she refused. She walked away, leaving him to the ravens, not because she hated him, but because she had learned too much. Killing him would have been easy. Letting him live or die on his own terms was harder. It was her first act of true strength, a strength he had helped forge. She was no longer the girl who fled the twins. She was something more, something sharper, something ready for the world's cruelty. The hound's legacy is not in songs or statues, it is in Arya Stark, in the wolf who learned to bite. He gave her no love, no hope, no dreams. He gave her the truth, and in that truth she found the will to survive. The world of Westeros is a graveyard, its history written in blood. Ned Stark's honor, Robb Stark's love, Catelyn Stark's hope, they are gone, their lessons lost to the wind. But Arya's fire burns a flame kindled by a dog who refused to die. And in that flame there is no comfort, no peace, only the relentless, ruthless will to keep going. That is the revelation of Sandor Clegane's life. To survive is to fight, to steal, to endure. And in teaching Arya Stark to survive, he gave her the only thing that matters in a world of knives, a chance to fight back. But the world does not stand still. Arya's journey did not end in the Vale. She sailed across the narrow sea to Braavos, to the House of Black and White, where she sought to become no one. The faceless men promised power, promised freedom from pain, from memory, from self. But Arya could not let go. Her list, her fire, her name, they tethered her to who she was. The Hound's lessons echoed in those dark halls. To survive, you must be cunning, you must be sharp, you must be ready to kill. But you must also know who you are. The faceless men taught her to wear faces, to become anyone but the Hound, taught her to be Arya Stark, a wolf who would not bow. When she returned to Westeros, she was a killer, a shadow, a force of vengeance. She crossed names off her list: Walder Frey, Littlefinger, others who had wronged her family. But each kill was a weight, a scar, a piece of the girl she had been. The long night came, and with it, the dead. Arya fought not for glory, not for honor, but for life. She struck the blow that ended the Night King, a deed that would make her a legend. But legends are lies, and Arya knew it. She did what she had to, what the Hound had taught her: survive, fight, endure. And when the war for the Iron Throne followed, when Daenerys burned King's Landing and the world turned to ash, Arya saw the truth again. Power corrupts, fire consumes. The Game of Thrones destroys all who play it. She sailed west into the unknown, not as a hero, not as a queen, but as a survivor. And somewhere in the shadow of a scarred man's memory, the Hound's growl lingered. Keep going, little wolf. The world won't stop for you. The Hound's life was no song. It was a howl, a snarl, a blade in the dark. He was no knight, no lord, no savior. He was a dog, a killer, a man who lived because he refused to die. But in Arya Stark, he left something greater than gold or glory. He left a spark, a fire, a truth. The world breaks all it touches, but some learn to break it back. Arya Stark learned this not from her father's honor or her mother's love, but from a man who wore his scars like armor, who faced the world with a snarl and a sword. Sandor Clegane taught her to survive, not by shielding her, but by showing her the world's teeth. And in that brutal, ruthless truth she found the strength to be a wolf, to be a blade, to be a Stark. The wind howls through Westeros, carrying the screams of the fallen Ned's honor, Robb's love, Catelyn's hope. They are dust scattered by time. Cersei's love, Daenerys's fire, Jon's duty. They are gone, their dreams burned to ash. The Iron Throne is nothing. The Game of Thrones a lie, but Arya's fire burns still, a flame kindled in the shadow of a scarred man's growl. And in that fire there is no comfort, no peace, only the relentless will to keep going. That is the revelation of Sandor Clegane's life. Survival is not a gift, but a theft. And in teaching Arya Stark to steal it, he gave her the only thing that matters, a chance to live, to fight, to endure in a world that spares no one.